Pleasant good morning to Trinidad and Tobago as I take this opportunity on behalf of the leader of the opposition and political leader of the United National Congress, the Honorable Kamala Prasad Bisesa, to welcome you, the members of our great party and the wider Trinidad and Tobago, to this, the first in our press conferences, or the Sunday morning press conference for the year of 2022. And I take the opportunity to extend best wishes to all citizens of Trinidad and Tobago on the coming of 2022. And as we ended 2021, at this very said venue, we indicated that 2022, while we wanted to wish all of our citizens the best for a bright and prosperous new year, we were of the opinion that 2022 will be a year of monumental challenges in terms of what the people of Trinidad and Tobago will have to deal with based on the failure of the government of Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley over the last 6 years. But this morning, as we deal with some very critical issues confronting the people of Trinidad and Tobago from an educational point of view and also from the point of view of the industrial relations front and the labor front, I want to take the opportunity again this morning to express on behalf of the leader of the opposition and political leader of the United National Congress, the Honorable Kamala Prasad Bisesa, and all members of our great party, to express our deepest condolences to the family of the late Dr. Riza Mohammed, who went to the great beyond yesterday. Whilst we are saddened on his passing, we take comfort in the fact that he served Trinidad and Tobago with distinction and he made a contribution to nation building based on his sense of commitment and dedication to party and service to Trinidad and Tobago. Having served as the Member of Parliament for Princestown and from a ministerial capacity, serving in the portfolios of Minister of the Environment and Minister of Agriculture, and making his mark in relation to his views and contribution as it relates to the development of the agricultural sector in our country. We extend our condolences to members of the bereaved family once again, and we pray that Almighty God will comfort you at this very difficult period in your respective lives, and we also pray that Almighty God will indeed guarantee him a place in the hereafter based on his book of deeds. This morning, Trinidad and Tobago is in a state of confusion, chaos, and virtually on the brink of anarchy because of the lack of leadership and the lack of direction from a prime minister and a government that has left the citizens of this country leaderless, visionless, to the point that there is no direction and there is no hope. And in this regard, this morning, as I said earlier, we want to focus on the education sector, and we want to focus on the state of industrial relations and where we are today based on the Prime Minister's pronouncement or announcement in the middle of December 2021 as it relates to the announcement of whether it is a safe zone, a quasi-safe zone, and we could go on and on as it relates to that. But firstly, I want to take the opportunity to hand over to my learned colleague, the Member of Parliament for Tobago, our shadow within the Parliament of this country, who has the responsibility for education, who will focus on the state of affairs as it relates to the education sector in Trinidad and Tobago. So it is my pleasure to hand over to Ms. Anita Haynes.
Thank you so much, MP Ndarsingh, and good morning to all of our viewers across the many platforms, and good morning to the members of the media. Today, as MP Ndarsingh said, we are very focused on how the government's policies have failed our nation, and in particular, I would be looking at the failure of the government to ensure equitable education for all citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. In the first instance, we began this year with the Ministry of Education telling us that we will begin a phased reopening of physical schools. From that announcement, we got none of the data that the ministry ought to have collected with the beginning of the reopening, with the seeing Form 6, Form 5 and Form 4 students in physical school spaces. And so for the Ministry of Education, we are now 2 years into a pandemic and they still haven't gotten this right. They are still unable to utilize data to inform policy making. They are extremely ad hoc in not only their decision making, but arbitrary in their consultation, and they have been ineffective in ensuring equitable education for all members of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. So I begin by the reopening of the physical school spaces. Through my own consultation from my office as the Member of Parliament for Tobago and the Opposition Shadow for Education, it has been brought to my attention that schools have not been given any sort of assistance with respect to sanitization. So if you are talking about reopening schools physically, you have to be talking about how you can keep our students safe. In order to do so, you have to put the necessary force behind maintaining clean sanitary spaces. A number of schools have reached out to me to let me know that over the time, what they would have received is some bleach and extra cleaning cloth. This is simply not good enough. And the government has not been upfront and honest with the population. So you have schools, because teachers want to keep the spaces safe, reaching out to parents for any kind of additional help that they can get to just keep the spaces safe. So if you are talking the reopening of physical schools, the ministry really needs to come and be clear with us in terms of what are they putting in place to keep the physical spaces sanitary and the learning environment conducive. We've had since the beginning of the pandemic this question of a hybrid learning system where some persons are virtually asked to attend school and some persons now being accepted back into physical spaces. However, what we've had in the past year and a half has been announcements about device programs. So you've had the corporate society coming forward, you've had the government allocating in 2 successive budgets money for devices. But when we received the report from the budget, we've seen how little they've actually distributed, with about 14,000 devices being distributed from the government via the means test. This is without the Adopt School corporate program. But we have had, coming from the Parliament, from the Joint Select Committee on Public Administration, the information coming to us is that there are some 70,000 students who have been unable to access online school. The ministry has provided no up-to-date data, so we have no idea if this number continues. We've also had a number of students who've been unable to be promoted in the school system because they've been unable to go to class to meet the requisite attendance for promotion or to go into another standard or form, as it were. And so, as a society, we have to ask the question, if the government isn't using this time to collect real-time data, if they are not using this time to use that data to inform the future policy decisions, then how are we going to fare as a nation? We've all accepted very clearly as well that education is the passport to a better life, to more secure earning potential, for a way for entire families to improve their circumstance by investing in their children, investing in the young people, and making a way for themselves to have better earning potential in the future. And in that regard, you've seen a number of families do all that they can, sacrifice all that they have to ensure that their children have a space. And that brings me to one very concerning development with the GATE program. I've had a number of parents reach out to me. They are being told, after having completed the means test, after having submitted all of their information, and being told that they have qualified for 75% assistance based on the means test. So based on the means test that the government themselves implemented, people are qualifying for assistance. However, that assistance is not forthcoming, and therefore students are unable to register for classes, unable to participate in their tertiary education. The parents are being told that they have to put the money up front and they would be reimbursed. The whole point of the means test is to say that you didn't have the money to put it up front, and therefore you have students who have attained the necessary grades to access tertiary education, who have done all that they can, including submitting the documents in a timely fashion for this means test, being barred from accessing education because they are unable to find the financial resources. And then in some instances where they do take loans, they find a chance to get the resources to get the child in school, they are then being told that because they were able to find money in that one instance, that they may not qualify for assistance for tertiary education going forward. This is completely dishonest. This is a government that is absolutely betraying the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. Where you can do all you can try to work with the system to improve your circumstances. You are not asking for any special attention, any special secret scholarship. You're not asking for any of these things. You are playing by the rules, and then you are being betrayed by just attempting to help yourself and help the circumstance of your family. And so as we move forward, as we go forward, and we are still very well in the space of the pandemic, we are looking for improved policy making, informed policy making by the Ministry of Education. We are looking for data-driven policy, and that they should treat the people of Trinidad and Tobago with sufficient enough respect that we are provided with the data so that we can make informed decisions and participate in the formulation of the education policy of this country. And until we get to that point, we will continue to see the rampant failure by the Ministry of Education, and they are failing all of us by failing the future generation of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. MP Ndarsing.
Okay, thank you very much, MP Anita Haynes, for your focus on the state of virtual collapse, or the near collapse of our education system, and the consequences of the pandemic on the children and the children's future in Trinidad and Tobago. I now want to turn to the very important issue too of the Prime Minister's announcement that he made on the 18th of December 2021 at a media conference at the Diplomatic Center, where he announced that effective mid-January 2020, and with the exception of those who cannot, that all members of the public service must be vaccinated. And similarly, all state enterprises will be directed to put the same restrictions in place. And before I go on, it is important for me to reiterate what the position of the United National Congress has been on this particular matter, because there are those who within the framework of Trinidad and Tobago, and those who from time to time will want to shape the narrative and create the position that the United National Congress is anti-vaxxers and we have undermined the government's vaccination program and so on. I want to state again, through the leader of the opposition, that all of us at all levels of our party are not anti-vaxxers, and we have all been in support of vaccination and a vaccination rollout. But what we have stated in a very clear and assertive manner is that we are against the implementation of any mandatory vaccine mandate in this country. And history will tell you we are virtually approaching now the third year into this pandemic. And through the leader of the opposition and respective colleagues in the parliament and outside of the parliament of this country, we have called upon the government to get serious about its vaccination policy, as other governments have displayed in the region in terms of the procuring of vaccines, when our government, if you trace the history, sat very passively and inactively, to the point where the leader of the opposition wrote the government of India to request that free COVID-19 vaccines be made available to the people of Trinidad and Tobago via India's global vaccination program. And in that regard, we call upon the government to champion a program of what we would call community engagement, house-to-house engagement, to deal with the apprehension, the fear, and the vaccine hesitancy that their inaction, their laziness, their lack of leadership created in Trinidad and Tobago. And we have always said that the government, and we will maintain that the government, has failed miserably as it relates to the appropriate communication and engagement strategies. And the records will show that we have supported vaccine for diseases such as yellow fever, malaria, polio, mumps, and measles, and so on. And also, the government has been advocating through the Prime Minister and the various ministers of cabinet that they are following the protocols of the World Health Organization. The World Health Organization has made it clear that mandatory vaccinations should be pursued as a last resort. And in fact, this was made very clear in a pronouncement that was dated the 12th of July 2021, when, and I quote from Dr. Hans Kluge, the Europe Director of World Health, who told a press conference that vaccinations should not be made mandatory if you haven't reached out first to the communities. Mandates around vaccination are an absolute last resort and only applicable when all other feasible options to improve vaccination uptake have been exhausted. And the Prime Minister made his pronouncement in mid-December, and since his pronouncement there has been mayhem, confusion, chaos, and a lack of leadership and direction as it relates to the state of affairs, as it relates to the operations of the public service of Trinidad and Tobago. And we in the United National Congress, we view the Prime Minister's announcement as one that strikes at the heart of citizens' constitutional rights, their human rights, their privacy rights, and raises very serious issues, ethical issues, about the overreach of the state as it relates to the lives and civil liberties of our people. And I want to take the opportunity here this morning to show you the state of chaos, confusion, and a reckless Prime Minister who has failed to really give a true sense of direction, having made his pronouncement in the middle of December of 2021. And I have in my hand here a number of circulars. One is from the General Manager, signed by the General Manager of the Public Transport Service Corporation. I have one dated the 31st of December 2021 from the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Public Administration, which is addressed to Permanent Secretaries, the heads of division, and public service and public sector vaccination program, and also one from Mr. Earl Wilson, the Chief Executive Officer of the National Quarries Limited, and then we have one from the Trinidad and Tobago Electricity Commission that is signed by one Mr. Sean Chase, the Operation Manager North of TNTech. And the confusion is from the beginning. One, we are being told of a public sector safe zone initiative. Then we are being told of a public service and public sector vaccination program. And then we are being told about mandatory vaccination safe zone at the National Quarries Limited. And the question has to be asked this morning on whose legal advice and authority was the Prime Minister operating on. Where did he get his legal advice, and on whose legal authority he was acting on when he made this particular pronouncement? I know that the Prime Minister is not an expert in law, and I know also that the Prime Minister is not an expert in industrial relations and labor law matters and so on. And up till today, public servants are being hammered, they are being pulverized, they are being threatened, they are being abused. The Prime Minister and his cabinet virtually have their eyes and their fingers in their fingers in the eyes of public servants, poking their fingers in the eyes of public servants, and the government has failed to legally define what is meant by their terminology, what is a safe zone, or what is a quasi-safe zone in the context of the operations of the public service, and has failed effectively to communicate with public servants, and more importantly to the recognized majority unions within the framework of the public service. Because I want to quote from the circular memorandum which was dated the 31st of December 2021 and signed by one Mr. Claudel McKellar, Acting Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Public Administration, and it states, it is the government's policy that the public sector will operate as a quasi-safe zone with effect from the 17th of January 2022. This means that the operations of organizations within the public sector, and in brackets, ministries, departments, aid authorities, corporations, and companies, are to be conducted only by employees who have provided proof of having received any of the WHO-approved COVID-19 vaccination, or employees who have received the appropriate vaccination exemption. And then from the General Manager of the PTSC signed on the 31st of December 2021, it is stated that reference is made to the Prime Minister's announcement on the 18th of December 2021, and it goes on to indicate allowing only vaccinated and those who have medical reasons for not taking the vaccine to operate. Please be advised that the Public Transport Service Corporation, in keeping with this mandate, will require all employees to provide proof of vaccination/exemption where necessary over the period 3rd to the 7th of January 2022 to their heads of department. And in respect to the implementation of a safe zone work environment effective the 15th of January 2022, the corporation will be guided by the relevant legislation in the execution of same. So you have one saying the 17th of January 2022, you have one saying the 15th of January 2022, and indicating that the corporation will be guided by the relevant legislation. I want to reiterate, relevant legislation in the execution of same. And then you have from the Chief Executive Officer of the National Quarries Limited, and he goes on to spell out in this regard the circular from the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Public Administration, and states that these restrictions include state enterprises such as the National Quarries Limited, and on or before Friday the 14th of January 2022, all employees of National Quarries Limited will be required to present to the Human Resources Department your original and copy of your COVID-19 vaccination card back and front by 4 p.m. It must be noted that, and it goes on to say, it must be noted that persons who cannot be vaccinated must provide the medical exemption from a registered specialist physician. And additionally, any person who previously tested positive are required to await the time period after the 16th of November 2021 before vaccination must provide their positive test notification document. Also, I want to read this particular line. Also, persons due to religious reasons are unable to be vaccinated must present documentation from their church official, which must be authenticated. And it goes on to say any employee who do not meet the specifications above will be followed without pay until they are vaccinated. So you see the confusion, the chaos, and the lack of direction that is coming from the government. And in addition to the legal definition that the government has failed to effectively communicate with public servants, I ask the question too, has the government realized any memorandum of association or agreement with the recognized majority unions up till this point in time? Whether it is the Public Services Association, the National Union of Government and Federated Workers Union, the Contractor and General Workers Trade Union, the Trinidad and Tobago Unified Teachers Association, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service Welfare Association, the Fire Services Association, the Trinidad and Tobago Prison Officers Association, and I could go on and on here this morning. But what is more important, this term, you will be fuller, is a fancy word. It is something that the Prime Minister is attempting to confuse you with. What he is really telling you is that you will be dismissed, you will be constructively dismissed at the end of the day. And you see what is unfolding here in terms of this quasi-safe zone pronouncement is not something that is in keeping with the constitution of this country, the rule of law in this country, and in addition to the legislative architecture, or should I say the architecture, the legal architecture framework which governs the collective bargaining process and the industrial relations process in Trinidad and Tobago. Because for me, it is one of a continuing strategy and tactic in this country by the Prime Minister and his government to water down, to erode the Constitution, to show flagrant disregard and disrespect for the Constitution of this country. And we have blatant examples that have been displayed, that have been carried out over the last 6 years, where there was watering down of critical pieces of legislation that required a 3/5 majority. And I could point you to the procurement legislation. I could point you to the Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority legislation. I could point you to the legislation as it related to the Strategic Services Agency, the SSA, and the amendments that came. And you must never forget that the Attorney General in this country told the citizens that they had no right to privacy. They had absolutely no right to privacy. And what we are seeing being rolled out here today is draconian, sinister, anti-human rights, unconstitutional. And from where I sit, it is the continuation of what I would term to be raging bull politics. I want to reiterate, raging bull politics, which we were warned of prior to Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley becoming the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. And I believe that this mandatory vaccination policy against public servants is another example of the public servants and the people of this country feeling the wrath of Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley and his bullying and his arrogant and his anti-people and anti-union government. Because we must never forget that the week before the THA election, to warn the country of the price, he warned the country of the price that they will have to pay for voting against the PNM. He came after the elections having lost to unleash this wrath. And as I said, there is no framework to govern this particular mandate that has been, no legal framework that has been ruled out as it relates to this mandate that the government has pronounced on. And we in the United National Congress want to again warn the population, warn the public servants. Because if you go back from 1965 to 2021, the PNM has carried out a series of consistent attacks on the labor movement and the workers and people of Trinidad and Tobago. The PNM has not been a party that is pro-labor, pro-people, and pro-workers. The PNM has always been a party that has represented and advocated the interests of the powerful in our society against the ordinary citizens of our country. You only have to see what they did with the Industrial Stabilization Act, the reign of terror they carried out as it relates to the Industrial Relations Act. You could recollect Bloody Tuesday when they armed the police against workers who were seeking peace, bread and justice in 1975-76. And under the government of Prime Minister Patrick Manning, we must never forget it was a PNM government that wanted to decertify the Transport and Industrial Workers Union and decertify the Communication Workers Union based on these two unions seeking to advocate workers' interests under the collective bargaining process and the Industrial Relations Act in Trinidad and Tobago. And I only want to further exemplify this point of bulldozing and running roughshod over the Constitution and the rule of law and the rights of the ordinary citizen of this country. I want to read from this Saturday Newsday of the 8th of January 2022, page 13, from a quotation that was made by a Ministry of Education worker. And I quote, "I have to work, I have children to see about, and I cannot afford not to be employed. What the government is doing is forcing us," I want to reiterate, what the government is doing is forcing us to take it. That is the COVID-19 vaccine. And by taking it, they are taking away our bread and butter. So we do not have a choice. So this has nothing to do with a safe zone or a quasi-safe zone. This has to do with a prime minister and a government that is bulldozing its way, eroding and trampling on the constitution of the country through the issue of privacy rights, and in addition to Section 4 and 5 of the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago. And in addition to that, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, we must ask the question, what are the laws which must be amended to facilitate the creation of a quasi-safe zone? What are the processes that must now be adjusted? Will all new vaccines be vacancies, in the public service will be advertised with a vaccine requirement? Will upcoming promotion be based on a vaccine requirement? And in this regard, we are forced to ask some additional or raise some additional issues as it relates to the state of affairs of where we are, because we also believe, in addition to breaching the Constitution, it is a violation of the Data Protection Act. Whilst this act is partially proclaimed, the overall objective of this act is to ensure that protection is afforded to individuals in terms and citizens in terms of their right to privacy and their right to maintain personal information as private and confidential. And we must never forget, and this is why I have to ask the Minister of Labour, Mr. Stephen McClatchy, what is your role in giving advice to the Prime Minister and the Cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago? Why are you so silent? Have you gone into hiding just as your predecessor? Where is the leadership from the Ministry of Labour? Is it you who told the Prime Minister to impose mandatory vaccine? Did the Minister of Labour consult with the National Tripartite Advisory Council? And where we are as it relates to the erosion and the disrespect for independent institutions in this country. We must never forget that this is the Prime Minister and his cabinet who eroded, who bulldozed the independence of the Police Service Commission, and through their actions virtually resulted, not virtually, but resulted from a historical point of view, recreated history, where for the first time in the country, we did not have a substantive police commissioner. For the first time in our country, an independent institution such as the Police Service Commission collapsed. And in this regard, I want to ask the Prime Minister, because they are continuing with their march of destruction of independent institutions, the Prime Minister is now trampling on the industrial court and the judges at the industrial court, because it is the president of the industrial court who pronounced, and I as a practitioner, prior to becoming a member of parliament, through my involvement at the Old Trinidad Sugar and General Workers Trade Union, will tell you, and anybody with elementary law school experience and so on, a law student will tell you that you cannot unilaterally alter the terms and conditions of employment of any worker in this country. So where is the legal authority, and why did the Prime Minister and his cabinet show blatant disregard and disrespect for the president of the industrial court when she gave the advice to all and sundry in this country that the employment of a worker in terms of his or her terms and conditions of employment cannot be unilaterally altered without the agreement of the worker, and in this instance from the public service, without the concurrence of the recognized majority union in this country. And in this regard, the government seems to be hell-bent. They have said that they have ended the process of consultation, and they are on the verge of illegally locking out thousands of public servants based on this mandate that they want to institute illegally. And this morning, I want to again reiterate a point that I made earlier on this week, where public servants must unify and display one voice and report to their respective workplaces and demand from their permanent secretaries and demand from their head of department and demand from their CEOs and so on in state enterprises and statutory enterprises and so on, authorities, to tell me what I have done wrong, what I have infringed in terms of rules and regulations in the workplace, and to be provided in writing with a reason or reason why I am being debarred from entry into the workplace. Because the government is on the verge of becoming a runaway employer, a renegade employer, in illegally locking out public servants from their workplace. And I want to, in addition to this advice, I want to call upon the labor movement also to close ranks at the level of NATUC and FITON and JTUM, to file the appropriate industrial relation offenses at the industrial court, and probably to seek injunctive relief within the courts of Trinidad and Tobago to stop this runaway government, this high-handed government, as it relates to this particular issue of their disrespect for the Constitution and the rule of law in this country. And we in the United National Congress, very quickly, before I wrap up, I want to say that we believe that a safe zone can be created within the public service without making vaccines mandatory. The forcing of public servants to be vaccinated is as a result of the failure of the Prime Minister and the government to inspire confidence nationally in their vaccination programs. And we believe that there should be the realignment of workspaces to be 6 feet apart from each other, the establishment of a public service COVID-19 sanitization unit within ministries, within each department, within state enterprises and so on, which would sanitize public offices regularly and in the event of a positive COVID case, assignment of or creation of a unit within each government agency to enforce and digitize contact tracing, an audit of the PPE needs of each public agency, and the establishment of a unit dedicated to assessing, procuring, and distribution of PPE throughout this public service where necessary. And in addition, there be an assessment of public goods and services accessed by our citizens and evaluation of public areas at state agencies to ensure that citizens can be served while being socially distant and furnished with running water, soap, and sanitizer. And even the creation of a hotline vested in the Ministry of Labor to be used where public officers to report concerns of unsafe work environment where the management of public agencies are not enforcing anti-COVID measures. Where is the Occupational Safety and Health Agency Minister of Labor and an insurance benefit for families of frontline public servants who may have lost their lives due to contracted COVID-19 on the job? And this has been made very glaring in terms of what is happening within the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. So from where I sit, my dear brothers and sisters of Trinidad and Tobago, we must unify, we must continue all of our efforts to push back on a government, to send a message to a government that you cannot continue to trample upon the constitution of the country. You cannot continue to trample on the ordinary rights of the citizens because you believe that you are powerful. You believe that you have the power, so you could disregard the rights of the ordinary citizens of the country. And you will do nothing about the price of flour. You will do nothing about the price of bread. You will do nothing about the price of coffee and evaporated milk. You will do nothing about the price of chicken. But what you will do is that you will take away, you will suspend social support in the form of your food card program. When you distributed food cards left, right, and center, even blank forms were being distributed in the recently concluded Tobago THA elections. You now suspend the vegetable program because you have no need for votes in Tobago. So you suspend that program also. And at a time when there is over 130,000 persons and growing as it relates to unemployment in Trinidad and Tobago, and the state of parents too, unable to provide connectivity, unable to provide devices and so on for the welfare and well-being of their children's education. The time has come for all and sundry to unify, to get in line and tell Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley, enough is enough. We, the people, have the power in terms of those who want to trample those who want to disregard the voice of the ordinary in our society. I thank you very much, and members of the media, if there are any questions here this morning, myself and MP Haynes will avail ourselves to you all.
Right, so for MP Haynes, my question, are you hearing me?
Yes.
Yeah, my question would be, you said, well, it's two questions. The first one would be, you said that the education ministry has not done enough consultation.
Well, it is a combination of consultation and data collection. So giving us the data that is informing their policy making. So what was the question specifically?
Yeah, so the question was specifically, do you think we need to have consultations with groups that are who do not normally speak directly to the ministry? Say, for example, parents directly as opposed to PTAs, and students as well, because they have a say in this as well.
Correct. Well, no, not that way expanding the base of, right? But there are ways to do it. So the same way you can implement online surveys, the same way you can utilize the technological space to get inputs from persons that you ordinarily would not reach. I think this pandemic, having taken a lot more of us online and off of the physical spaces, should allow for more voices to ring more clearly to decision makers. But what when I talk about consultation, it's not just the face value of consultation, not just we're having a meeting, but that when there's a meeting of stakeholders, that they are also presented with the data that the ministry has, that has informed the policy making that the ministry is proposing. And then you have informed and productive consultation, because we're sitting here with the same data and we're making decisions to the same end. Instead, you have the ministry holding their information, presenting a decision that has already been made, and then asking for your opinion on it, saying, well, we are the decision makers, this is what we want to do, have your say here, and then they'll make an announcement. And I think that is not productive, it's not efficient, and it will not give us the best results for the students in this country.
Right, thank you.
Welcome.
And MP Darcy, there was a point you had made about, first of all, you said that the vegetable program was suspended.
Yes.
I entered.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And so you had said that vaccine mandates, according to the WHO, are supposed to be the last resort. Do you think that the government feels that this is the issue? This is the point of last resort, considering they've been trying to get people to get vaccinated since earlier this year, since
Well,
I remember.
we are very clear that the government, and I've stated, and this is the article that I've referred to, where it clearly says the WHO mandatory vaccination are a last resort. This is a government every day. They're in your face through Dial Singh and the CMOH and the medical team, that we are following the science, we are following the World Health Organization protocols. Even when people are brought into the debate about the use of ivermectin and so on, he continues to boast that this is not WHO approved. We are saying, and we have said, that where is the communication, the rollout, where is the community engagement, where is the house-to-house engagement as it relates to the vaccination rollout that was promised by Minister Dial Singh? And in that regard, we have said to the government, based on their bungling, based on the chaos, based on the confusion that we are seeing after 2 years into the pandemic, indeed, we are of the opinion that the government has failed and failed miserably. And that is why we are saying to the government that you have not exhausted and you have not explored. And you see the chaos and confusion. Look how the pain the suffering, the trauma of persons or families when their loved one die, whether it is in Arima or Cuba or Point Fortin or San Fernando or wherever. They cannot get information, they do not know where their bodies are, and so on. Why can the Minister of Health and his team cannot get a dedicated team in each venue or each area within the parallel healthcare system to effectively communicate with families in terms of providing an update with their, in terms of the medical status of their loved one? And even when a person die, why the families have to be running helter-skelter all over the country? Why even is there this backlog or this pile-up of bodies at our mortuaries in the country? After 2 years into a pandemic, where's the science to tell the loved ones that they cannot cremate their families in a timely manner, whether you're Hindu, Christian, Presbyterian, Baptist, whatever? Why the incompetence? Why the chaos and confusion?
Because I was going to say, having spoken to Mr. Belgrove a couple of times this week, my understanding, well, first of all, the WHO actually has a document that says that COVID-19 bodies should not be cremated open air. So that's probably one of the factors that they're weighing on. But also, you were saying that the problem is that the families cannot claim the bodies. The bodies are there. The families know they're there, but they can't claim the bodies because they don't have the funds to cremate them.
I said, and I will reiterate this point, there is a deafening silence from the Minister of Health and the Chief Medical Officer. I don't know where Mr. Belgrove got his authority, and the media should ask Mr. Belgrove, on whose instruction, on whose authority is he acting? On the instructions of the Minister of Health or the CMOH as it relates to the disposal of bodies in this country? At the end of the day, the issue is one of persons have told me in the constituency of Cuba South, and it is throughout, I am sure, my colleague in Tabaki, in Chaguanas West, in Chaguanas East, in Siparia, and so on. They can bear testimony to what I am saying about the exorbitant cost as it relates to the cremation of loved ones via the crematorium process. It is between $25 to $30 and beyond $30,000. And there is a deafening silence from the Minister of Health and the CMOH. And one has to ask the question, who is benefiting from financially or otherwise in keeping this ban alive? And when you tell me that there is a World Health Organization document, I have already documented in relation to the disposal of bodies, and I want to quote directly from this World Health Organization. You see, in Trinidad and Tobago, we like to create a narrative to paint a particular direction or carry out an agenda. And I want to quote directly from this WHO document. To date, there is no evidence of persons having become infected from exposure to the bodies of COVID, of persons who have died from COVID-19. People may die of COVID-19 in the health center care facility. The safety and well-being of everyone who tends to bodies should be priority. Before attending to a body, people should ensure that the necessary hand hygiene and personal protective equipment and supplies are available. And the dignity of the dead, I want to reiterate this, the dignity of the dead, their cultural and religious tradition, and their families should be respected and protected throughout. This is coming from the World Health Organization. If Diyal Singh and if Roshan Parasram and if Keith Rowley and Faris Al-Rawi would have read this particular document as it relates to following the science and following the World Health Organization, they will do all in their powers to ensure that the disposal of the dead is respected in the context of cultural and religious tradition as espoused by the World Health Organization.
All right, thank you.
If there are no further questions from members of the media, we want to thank you all for being here, and we want to advise that the United National Congress will continue with its Sunday morning press briefings and other briefings during the course of the weeks and months in 2022, that we will continue to hold the government of Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley accountable in all their actions, and to be transparent in relation to what they should be committed to in expending the taxpayers' dollars of Trinidad and Tobago. We thank you.
And they can also join us. You can also join us with our virtual Monday meeting tomorrow starting at 7 p.m.